Dale Carnegie says, people take what is familiar for granted. And when that familiarity accumulates, it soon becomes a right. The moment your kindness turns into something that is taken for granted, the other person no longer feels grateful. If you help someone, they may be thankful at first, but if kindness continues, it becomes a right. Even if they were grateful in the beginning, over time, it gradually becomes taken for granted. Once helping becomes an everyday thing, at some point, not helping starts to seem strange. The person who once expressed gratitude eventually begins to complain, as though something was taken from them. A good person often goes through this situation. When asked for a favor, they cannot refuse, and once they help, they keep on helping. But as time passes, people stop feeling thankful. If you do not help them as before, they suddenly say, "Why are you acting like this?" showing their disappointment. This sort of direct response is at least honest, but more often, they pretend nothing is wrong on the outside while secretly thinking you are stingy, making the helper seem small-minded. The one who received help instantly becomes the considerate person, while the one who actually gave the help is treated as narrow-minded behind their back. The moment it becomes taken for granted, gratitude disappears. When help is no longer special, but becomes the norm, it becomes difficult to refuse it. A good person wonders, did I help too much? But that is not where the problem lies. Humans have a tendency to accept repeated situations as natural. At first, they feel indebted, but as time goes by, they start to view it as though it is their right. The person who once asked for a favor later demands it. The person who once felt sorry eventually starts to complain. The person who once felt grateful eventually feels let down. Some may openly express dissatisfaction when refused, but more often they say nothing and simply change their attitude. Someone who would have struck up a conversation before now becomes awkward and is less friendly than usual. Meanwhile, the other person acts as if nothing is wrong. By this point, a good person feels confused. Why do people treat a good person as easy to exploit? They wonder. People, at their core, put their own interests first. If they can receive help, it is convenient to accept it. And it feels natural to keep asking until they are refused. But if the other person always responds kindly, people let their guard down. If the other person does not refuse, they think it is fine to ask for more. The moment they no longer feel they must respect that person's kindness, not receiving help suddenly becomes the wrong thing. People ask more from those who never refuse. That is why a good person is often taken advantage of. Being good is not a mistake, but giving without boundaries is dangerous. When you help, you need to think about how the other person will take it. From the start, setting a limit by saying, "I will only help you 2 times," is one way. That way, the other person will not take it for granted. Also, you need to practice refusing. Just saying, "I am in a tough spot right now," is enough to make them reconsider your kindness. Being good is a virtue. But if you are only good, you get ignored. It is not that a good person always suffers, rather. Those who do not draw boundaries end up at a disadvantage. In the end, if a good person does not want to be treated like a fool, they must be both kind and worthy of respect. That choice rests solely with you. People do not treat strong people carelessly, but they easily lean on and sometimes ignore a good person. Even if they hear the same words, one person's opinion is taken seriously. while another's words are brushed aside. Where does this difference come from? You might wonder. In the end, it all comes down to how the other person perceives us. And that perception begins to form from the very first meeting. A first impression sets the tone of a relationship. For example, there is one person who speaks little, has a low, but steady and calm voice, and another who greets first, goje, the other person's feelings, and approaches in a friendly manner. The second person's tone is gentle, and they strongly consider the other person's comfort. Which of these two will make a stronger impression? People unconsciously judge, through demeanor and tone, just how far they can push the other. One person may be quiet yet leave a strong impression, while another may be gentle, but appear easy to deal with. And that first impression decides the direction the relationship will take from then on. If a good person does not balance the relationship from the start, the other person naturally expects more. In the end, someone who is easy to approach becomes someone you can easily ask for favors. And someone you can easily ask for favors is more likely to be exploited. A strong person does not always act rough, but they show clear boundaries, even when asked for a favor. They prioritize their own work and firmly draw the line if needed. Meanwhile, some good people try to avoid conflict as much as possible, going out of their way to ensure the other person is not uncomfortable. This approach is advantageous for fostering good relationships, but the problem is they maintain, even when the other person does not respect their kindness. In the beginning, people say thanks. It is all thanks to you, yet at some point, they start saying, that is just who they are. In the end, a strong person is seen as someone who can protect themselves, while a good person is seen as someone it is fine to rely on too easily. If you ask, what does a good person need in order to be trusted? You realize it is crucial to understand that being good is not the same as being weak. However, if the other person does not see that difference, then a good attitude can be interpreted as a weak attitude. So for a good person to be respected, they need to show more than mere kindness. They must demonstrate their value. This does not mean refusing favors is always important, but you do need to balance the relationship so that the other person does not take your kindness for granted. In a relationship where you always comply, your weight eventually disappears. Sometimes, you have to say, this time it is too difficult for me. By finding the right balance between a considerate attitude and a firm stance, you can be kind without being easily dismissed. A good person does not automatically lose out. But if you never define your boundary, people will not know where it lies. And inevitably comes a moment when kindness, that deserves respect, ends up being ignored. If a good person does not want to be treated like a fool, they must be both kind and strong. People like a kind person, but they respect someone who can stand up for themselves. If you lower yourself, you are bound to be appraised at a lower level. Some people find it hard to put themselves forward. Even if a chance to show their abilities arises, they back off, saying there are many who are better than me. They value caring for others, so they are not used to looking out for themselves. This attitude may appear prudent and humble, but over time people's perceptions begin to change. Initially, they might see you as a quiet, hard-working person. But as time goes on, they might start thinking, maybe they are not that capable after all. Eventually, when a critical moment arrives, the person who steps up more assertively is the one who draws attention and seizes opportunities. While humility is indeed a virtue, it stops being one the moment it makes you fade from view. Humility becomes harmful not because you lack ability, but because people cannot evaluate what they do not see. No matter how outstanding your skills, if you always step back and downplay your contributions, people around you will naturally start to do the same. Someone who forever helps quietly and never highlights their own role ultimately becomes as good as invisible. At some point, they become taken for granted. And in crucial moments, they are easily forgotten. Saying even a single sentence like, "I did this work," "I helped with this project," can change the situation. But if you do not express your value, the person who speaks more confidently gains recognition, and the person who is more proactive seizes the opportunity. In order to be respected, you must know how to show yourself. People who are properly recognized for their worth did not get there by accident. They make their role clear and do not put themselves down. There is no need to shrink your contributions. It is important to naturally say, "I solved this part of the project." If you have a suggestion, bring it up a little earlier than others, and in important moments say, "I am definitely confident about this part." You might worry about seeming arrogant, but people trust those who show confidence and respect those who know their own value. Humility is a fine attitude, but once it makes you vanish, you will be the only one who suffers for it. Lowering yourself might seem like consideration for others, but if that attitude piles up, you end up diminishing your own worth with your own hands. It is not that a good person succeeds, but that the person who knows how to show themselves succeeds. People may like someone quiet, but they respect someone with presence. Humans are inherently selfish. People may pretend to be good, but in the end they act in their own interests. Imagine someone asking for help on the street. People who are busy simply pass by. Someone is short on time. Someone finds it a hassle. Someone else just does not want to get involved. But if that person is famous, or if there is some reward for helping, people's attitudes change. It may look like a benevolent act on the surface, but in reality, they first consider what effect it will have on them. Pure altruism is rare. Most actions come with personal motives. It does not mean there is no morality. It is simply human nature learned for survival. Where does our instinctive selfishness come from? You might wonder. And if you think of the primitive era, in a tribal society, you had to protect your own resources and defeat competitors when necessary to survive. If you were kind to everyone, you would lose the strength to survive. That is why humans evolved to calculate first whether an action will benefit them. This is no different in modern times. For instance, if there is someone in the office who takes care of all the tasks, coworkers may be grateful at first, but soon begin to take it for granted. However, if there is a crucial project only that person can handle, then their value is not easily replaced. The same applies to relationships. It is not just about being nice, but about being someone who can provide value that the other person needs. In dating, too, the person who is not simply devoted, who has qualities the other person does not want to lose, is more respected. In the end, if you want to survive in your relationships, you should strive not to be just a good person, but a needed person. There is no need to deny that humans are selfish. On the contrary, once you accept it, you can understand relationships in a far more realistic way. To become a person whom others need, it is not about unconditional sacrifice, but about figuring out what value you can provide. And if you do not want to feel wronged in your relationships, you must accept that people ultimately think of their own interests first. The reason a good person gets disregarded, why some people are respected, while others are easily forgotten, all stems from the principle that humans are instinctively selfish. Knowing or not knowing this fact becomes the decisive factor that separates those who are respected in relationships from those who are ignored.